Hello and welcome to Inside Thompson Bowling Arena, Food City Center. I'm Ryan Sylvia. This is Noah Taylor. We're with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network. Tennessee gets the job done. Closer in the first half, I think 9-point lead at halftime, but at the end of the day, Tennessee blows out Montana. What's your instant takeaway from the win?
I think Igor Milicic is the guy. You know, it's kind of been the first, you go back to that Gardner-Webb game, you go back to Louisville certainly on Saturday in their first road test, and it's been those first three games you've had two of those big transfer portal additions kind of take over, and it was Chaz Lanier in the first two. He gets the 19 points on Saturday, and then tonight it's Milicic has, you talk about that first half being close. He was kind of the difference for Tennessee. It seemed like Montana, every time Tennessee kind of had some momentum, it looked like they were going to start pulling away there in the first half. They come down and answer, but he was the difference, and I think he had 14 points at the half, so a really strong first half, and I think it opened the way for Tennessee in that second half. Obviously, you start to get more balanced scoring. Chaz Lanier, who Rick Barnes talked about, kind of set a little bit because of foul trouble, ends up finishing with 13 points. Cam Carr, you get a lot of him off the bench. He plays well. I think JP Estrella had some pretty good minutes there too. So I think you saw some more balance in the second half, but there's no doubt that Igor was the guy that kind of got it rolling for Tennessee early.
Yeah, and it wasn't just scoring. He really did it all.
Yeah.
2 steals, had, I think, 5 assists, no turnovers.
Yeah.
He double-double with 10 rebounds on the defensive end. So it was kind of an all-around performance, and that looked like, I think, what kind of his ceiling is. And that's not an insult at all. That's a compliment that your ceiling is playing at that high level, because he was terrific tonight for Tennessee.
Yeah.
And if you can get that out of him, I think just even occasionally, just in random SEC games and random big moments, if you can get him to play towards that caliber, doesn't even have to drop 18 points a game. If he can just give you 12 and play all around pretty well and contribute on the defensive end, I think that really helps what Tennessee wants to do going forward. You mentioned Chaz Lanier as well. I think that's one of the biggest differences in the game that's not going to get talked about a lot. 7 minutes in the first half on the court, 1-for-1 shooting, hits a mid-range, 2 points, and really doesn't do much. Comes out in the second half and tears it up, 11 points in a really quick span, and all of a sudden you look up at the scoreboard and it's a 20-plus point game. And I think that is also really indicative of what Tennessee is going to look like this year.
Yeah.
Is you're going to have a Chaz Lanier game, or not Chaz Lanier game, but Chaz Lanier score in bunches, and you keep having to compare him to Dalton Knecht because the expectation is that he comes in and scores to replace what Dalton Knecht did. We keep saying it. It's unfair to expect exactly what Dalton did from Chaz, but if he can come in and do exactly what he just did and be an offensive spark for Tennessee and do that on a consistent basis, they'll be okay, and they'll be good because of the Igor Milicic, because of the Jordan Gainey's, because of the Zakai Zieglers on the team. But you mentioned Cam Carr. What you think about how he finished this game out?
Yeah, a guy that, Rick Barnes talked about after those first 2 games that they kind of expected a little bit more out of him. It felt like they were kind of pushing him a little bit. A guy that was in the program last year, obviously in a limited role as a freshman, but, with what you lost, you kind of expect him to kind of be a little bit of a bigger role player off the bench. And I think you saw that tonight. You mentioned seeing some ceilings out of guys, and in a positive way. I think he was one of those, was doing, was efficient, I thought. I don't have the stats in front of me, but did well on the offensive end. And Rick Barnes talked about, as he always does with any new player, any young players, defense is the emphasis, and they want him to do it on both ends of the floor. And I think you saw that tonight. I think he played really well, and really an asset for Tennessee off the bench. You're going to have, your starting 5 has been the same here for 3 straight games, but what are you going to get with the guys behind them? And we mentioned the transfers kind of taking over games in these first 3, and I feel like you've kind of had that a little bit with the bench too. I mean, it was Jordan Gainey, I think, in the first couple of games, and tonight I think Cam Carr was kind of the headliner off the bench. So a solid performance for him, and certainly something he could build off of as he looks to kind of increase those minutes and his role.
And you talked about Cam Carr needs to learn how to play defense, or at least consistently play defense to be a contributor on a consistent basis. Well, Bishop Oswald's a guy that kind of comes into things as a true freshman with a really nice foundation on the defensive end of the floor. I think for him, what it's going to come down to is taking care of the ball, because they want him to be that point guard. They want him to be able to kind of fill in behind Zakai Ziegler. It was interesting, you heard Cam Carr talk about it and how he talks about Zakai Ziegler taking him under his wing a little bit. And they're different players, of course, but they have similar prototypes where, like, these guys could really dominate on the defensive side. So if you can get Bishop Boswell as a true freshman to be able to take care of the basketball, have things start to slow down for him a little bit. I think that is when maybe he could find himself in a little bit more of an increased role here, but kind of a situation where you don't need him right now, I think. But if you can start to gain some confidence and get him some valuable minutes, he could be really good going forward, even in the future years. But post play, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, Felix Ekpara, another guy in one of those transfers that I think also he finishes with 13 points tonight. So, obviously it was Igor is the main guy in the rebounding. I think he led the team in rebounding with 10. But Felix is a guy that continues to play well, has played well in these first 3 games. Obviously, you've had some issues with maybe some goaltends and some. He had to get an interference call against Louisville, but I think you take that with a guy who's playing aggressive down there, who's kind of making his presence known. I thought overall he played well. And then we mentioned JP Estrella earlier, a guy that because we're dealing with some injuries in the preseason, wasn't sure how much he would be able to contribute early, and came off the bench and had a really nice sequence there. I think he scored on 2 straight possessions that kind of started to feel like the dagger for Tennessee in that second half. And Cade Phillips was a guy, Rick Barnes talked a lot about back there. Speaking of it, JP Estrella, Phillips kind of had to take on 2 positions there in the preseason with him, kind of limited, but had a really good game against Gardner-Webb, I thought, and then was really, really good against Louisville last week. And Rick Barnes kind of said he was disappointed tonight. Thought that performance against Louisville would carry over, and he just didn't see it out of him tonight. And obviously they have some high expectations for him as well. But thought he would build off of that and play a little bit better. But I think overall with what Felix gave you and what JP was able to do was pretty impressive.
Yeah, I thought Felix had a really impressive game on the defensive end as well. Of course, 13 points is the easy thing that's going to stand out. But, I mean, he was playing volleyball with some of those shots, swatting some shots away. So that was impressive. Josiah Jordan also had just a stupid block during that game. But that's kind of what we've come to expect from Josiah, is a great defensive performance. So you can these games are kind of funny with Josiah because he does such a good job, and he was one of the first offensive sparks for Tennessee from the mid-range, but he really stands out in those games like against Louisville, where he is just completely shutting down Pryor and doing such a great job on the defensive end that in some of these games against some of these weaker opponents, he doesn't necessarily shine as much. But I mean, I don't think you take anything away from what Josiah Jordan did tonight. Got to give a quick shout out to Money Williams for Montana. Lit Tennessee up. Rick Barnes clearly a little frustrated by it. I think it was kind of Cam Carr talked about too, kind of like hats off, respect, good game, but can't let that happen again here. So a really nice game from him. He's been a big time player in his young career for Montana, just a sophomore that suffered an injury last year, but a nice start for him and one of those players, see where he is in the future. In this age in college basketball, he could be a guy that, who knows, either here or somewhere else.
We're going to be talking about him this time next year
exactly.
in a similar light, but on Tennessee's side.
Or maybe in a SEC game when they're going up against another big opponent and he's one of their better players. It's just kind of the age of college basketball, but he looked phenomenal tonight. So that's definitely an easy name to remember going forward in the landscape of college basketball. That was all from us here, though, today, here inside Food City Center, Thompson Bowling Arena. Football, of course, Georgia on Saturday, a big game over in Athens. We'll be there. We'll have live coverage from over in Sanford Stadium, so make sure you head over to VolReport.com for full coverage as we count down to kickoff in a big-time matchup. Links to everything you need is in the description. Thanks for watching.